So on this one, we're going to be doing acrylic render, and just wanted to drop this little clip in, as if we're not rendering a block wall to look like brick, we're most certainly rendering over a brick wall to look like render. Like the title and thumbnail suggests, how to acrylic render. I'm going to show you and go into as much detail while keeping it as simple as possible, as easy to follow during this video. On the first video, we showed you how to apply your sand and cement, scratch coat it, and we dive into lots and lots of detail on the first video. And of course, you need to know all the preparation beforehand before you can just jump on to thinking about acrylic render. Then we went on to the rubbing it up smooth, and that basically covered coating, mix ratio, straightening, floating, and sponge finishing. And again, that's the background that is perfect for thin coat acrylic render. It is also, if you just want bog standard render, it's also a perfect video for that.
Describe Daddy's videos.
I'm actually about to start coating my acrylic render. You'll notice the background looks charcoal colour already. It is actually quite dull as the early bird gets the worm, and just, up early, get at it, get it done. You always want to do this in dry weather, guys, and again, overcast to me is best, as the sun won't be cooking it, making it set off any quicker than you. So a nice cool day probably is the best. But want to talk about the background first. So obviously scratch coated over brick, and then top coated and rendered smooth. And then you'll notice that what I'm applying is the same colour as my background, and that's because there's a charcoal primer on, and the reason you need that is that'll help it stick. Without that, it could potentially fail. I have heard of some guys going straight over sand and cement. I myself would not risk it. I would at least prime it or use something to help it adhere and stick and stay there. But a big shout out to Rambo Tools, as you might know them, as they were the guys that actually got us the primer. We had the acrylic, I think this is K-Ren, this one, but we had the tubs of that, but we did not have the primer. And everywhere we tried, Weber and K-Ren, it was going to take a long time, whereas Rambo Tools were able to match the colour and get us the primer done straight away, which was really helpful. So wasn't holding the job back, could get it actually on and finished. So I think they're also known as O'Neill Supplies, guys, that I think they do other Manacouche renders and thin coat renders too. So worth a thought, anybody who's looking to have this done or wanting to do it. But back to the job. So I'm applying just basically as you would skim a wall. I'm using a pretty sharp trowel. It's actually a Marshalltown, and I have cleaned my hawk, really scrubbed it, as you should do with any colour coats, guys. The scoop you use, the hawk trowel, and the finishing trowel or a plastic trowel, whatever you're going to use, you should really pay attention to scrub them. You don't want any wee bits of dirt getting in with the colour and spoiling it, and so there's something to take in mind with that. Also, what you will want to do is have it primed the day before. Again, I have seen guys prime that same day, but it is better to give yourself 24 hours for the primer. You can always read the primer as well. Some might be dry out quicker, but in this case you better letting it dry and then coating your acrylic render on the top. So you can see I'm just sort of keeping what's called a live joint, and what that is I don't want to go too far before I start finishing anything. Again, it is much cooler, so I could get a lot more on now than later on when it starts getting warmer, before it does start picking up. And also I do want to say about how thin this has to go. it is important to actually put it on thin. One, the stuff's very expensive, so putting it on thin is actually beneficial for saving money. Yes, it's hard work to keep it on thin and cut it back, ready to finish, but secondly, it does say that you should go thin with it. If I was doing anything large, like a big gable, you're definitely going to need a partner in to help you, as the joints can dry, and if the joints dry before you get it finished, or before you get the next bit coated on, they can rip and tear, and it'll look absolutely terrible. And that's because the stuff can pick up, and it's hard to explain. And again, I'll probably have to do a little test someday for you to show you exactly what that mistake would look like, but it would not look very nice on a gable wall whatsoever. So having many hands on a bigger job would be beneficial. For this case, it's not too big. It's perfect weather, so just solo is okay. But basically, as you see there, I've coated two joints basically, to underneath the sill and to the top of the head, and now I'm rubbing it, finishing it off. And I just like to do that, guys. And then what I said earlier was keep the live joint and start coating again from them joints over to another natural break where I can then finish another section. But thankfully, weather's perfect for this, and you know, I'm under no pressures, which is always a good thing when you're a plasterer. We've had enough pressure plastering out some houses in previous videos. You've seen the amount of days we were doing some reskin, refurbished jobs, and also an upcoming one, which will be another one where we floated out and skinned a new build. But basically, for finishing this acrylic, you just use the plastic floats. They tend to work best. Also, a Plasiflex will work too, guys. So, you know, if you do have one of them, you don't need to go out and buy another plastic trowel. Although this plastic trowel does work very, very well. This from Refina. I think they're called finishing floats or something like that. But basically, they're a plastic trowel. They're very light. They're easy to use, and they leave a lovely look. All you're doing really is rubbing it in, keeping the textures all the same, making sure there's no wee bits that are just sort of sticking out like a stipple. You want it all flat. Always clean your trowel as well, guys. That'll help stop them wee stipply drippy bits and keep the job cleaner and tidier for you. Another point is just mixing up your gear in the buckets. Obviously this stuff's older, so it does need a real good stirring, and keep scraping the sides. As you'll see, sometimes the dye gathers around the sides, and again, you don't want a big streak, a big sort of dark black streak on this wall, so you want to make sure it's really well mixed up, and just use the Ruby battery powered mixer, so don't have leads hanging about the job. It's portable. I can mix the buckets right where I'm gonna put on the wall and finish the wall. And as you can see, the daylight's out now out by the time we get right round the back, but it's really rubbing up nice. And the other point as well, guys, you see I'm wearing sort of older clothes, and basically this stuff will really stick to your clothes. So if you got old overalls or something, definitely stick them on. The other thing, just while we're talking about this stuff staining, is obviously cover up well. I have the ground covered up pretty well, but you want to sort of think to yourself, is it worth taping things up, taping up round windows, the fascia board, maybe the likes of that brick. I have a stop bead there, and I'm pretty confident I won't drip it on the brick. And secondly, if you're not going to tape it up, you're going to need to wash up. So it's either or it's also both. If you tape, you should probably still wash the tape just to make sure nothing sort of get around the edge or soak through. But I think we did a mix and match here. We taped up the windows and stuff, but we washed the fascia boards as we went. Sometimes when tape starts falling off fascia board, just gets in the way. And then we also removed the tape the same day and made sure everything was clean, because this acrylic will stick to metal. There's stuff on this trowel, yellow stuff and and sort of cream stuff on the back of this Marshalltown child that has been on for quite some time and doesn't seem to want to lift off it. So if it'll stick to metal, it certainly will stick to brick, to concrete, to tarmac. So you really want to make sure, keep your areas clean, and really think about how you're going to finish off cleaning and stuff, because you will not want to drip water on the actual finished wall, guys. That would be a disaster. Get this up close, sort of pick up the texture a wee bit, and you can see how it moves around. And then once you get it finished, you're done. You just move on to the next area. And that's the noise of it being finished. Very scratchy, but that's the way it does sound. It's the same as coating, very scrapey and scratchy noise, as there is wee grits in it. To me personally, this acrylic is probably one of the nicest finishes for exterior plastering, rendering. I just favourite over a lot of things. But I want to talk about this corner, guys. I want to get this with this corner. Basically, we're on an external corner here. There's the best way to actually do that is if you can split it up, do that wall, and then the next day or later on when it really firms up, do the next wall, and that'll just stop your edges turn. It's okay to overlap when you're doing this wall, and you can scrape it off after, and then again you do the exact same when this wall is tighter and I do the other wall. I can work in the stuff or scrape it away as my wall be firmed up. Preferably, if you are new to this, if you are trying to DIY it, you might want to do one wall one day and the other wall the next day, as it will take a bit of technique to do it the other way, so doing it that way will be that much easier. But again, I think I've covered nearly everything. If not, let me know in the comments. What do you do different? What did I forget? What have I left out? I think I've covered everything, but for sure hit me up in the comments.